Hello everyone. In today's video we're going to talk about the quadratic formula, and all of our answers today are going to have real roots. So I have two examples for you today, but first let's talk about this formula. This is one of the most famous formulas in algebra. This is the quadratic formula. This will find the answers to an equation that's in this form, which is standard form for a quadratic. Notice we can only use the quadratic formula when our equation is equal to 0. And all we do is take the a's and the b's and the c's, which are the coefficients, and we plug them into the formula, and we'll have the answers, all the values of x that make the equation true. So in example 1 here, we're going to solve to find all the values of x. Because quadratics have an exponent of 2, that's a good indicator or a good reminder that we could have up to 2 answers to this question. So let's find those 2 answers. I can't use the quadratic formula unless this is equal to 0, so I'm going to start by moving the negative 2 over to the other side. So I'll have negative, or 16x squared minus 32x plus 15, right? If I do plus 2 to both sides, now it's equal to 0. Now I can use the quadratic formula. A is 16, B is negative 32, and C is 15. So now I just need to put all those values into this formula. So it says negative b, so that would be a negative 32, or just 32, plus or minus the square root b squared, which is negative 32 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 16, times c, which is 15, all over 2 times a, which is 16. So I'm going to take my time simplifying this. I'm not going to try to type this all on my calculator, especially because there's no plus or minus button on my calculator. So I'm going to do 32. I am going to simplify the whole radical all at once. So I'm going to do negative 32 squared minus 4 times 16 times 15. You could do that all in your calculator, all as one step here. Make sure when you're squaring a negative, you put it in parentheses. So this whole radical works out to be 64. And my denominator is 2 times 16, which is 32. Good. Now I'm really tempted here to just say, oh, 32 divided by 32 is 1. You can't, in a fraction that has an adding problem on top, you can't just cross off part of the fraction. But what I can do here is I can do 32 plus or minus 32 over radical 64 over 32. I can split this into 2 problems, right? If there's a plus or a minus there, I can split it into 2 problems, and now I can do each of these problems. 32 divided by 32 is 1. Plus or minus, what's the square root of 64? That's 8. So my final answer here is almost here. 1 plus or minus 8 over 32, which will reduce to 1 plus or minus 1/4. So we have 2 answers here. We need to figure out what both of those are. So 1 plus 1/4 is 5/4. That's one of my answers. And 1 minus 1/4 would be 3/4. So we have 2 answers to this question here, 5/4 and 3/4. And you might see people write the answer in a little different format. I'll write that here. You might see people write it like this. X equals, and then little squiggly brackets, and then listing all the answers, all the values of x separated by a comma. All right, example 2 here, same setup, except this one's nicer. They gave it equal to 0. So let's use our quadratic formula. Let's say negative, so a is 3, b is negative 4, c is negative 6. So when we plug them in, we're getting negative 4, so that'll be 4 plus or minus square root negative 4 squared minus 4 times a times negative 6 all over 2a. All right, so they have everything plugged in. Just like the last one, I'm going to try to do the whole radical at once, just so that I can say it's time minus Notice when I do this, I do everything in parentheses because I want to remind myself that they're all separate terms, so they should be multiplied. So when I do everything under the radical, I end up getting 88. So that'll be 4 plus or minus radical 88 all over 6. So what I've noticed is radical 88, square root of 88, that's not a perfect square. So this is going to end up being an irrational answer. This question, just for time, I didn't specify how I want the answer. So this could just be my answer. I could just stop here and say my answer. But on these, a lot of times, they're going to tell you to simplify it as much as you can. So radical 88 can be simplified. I'm going to pick two numbers that multiply to 88, one of which is a perfect square. I'm going to pick radical 4 and radical 22. So this works out to be 2 radical 22. So 4 plus or minus 2 radical 22 all over 6. So radical 88, I simplified it to be 2 radical 22. And then just like the last one, I have one number in the bottom, but I have two numbers being added on top. So if I want to simplify this anymore, I need to split it. So I'm going to split it like that. And all I'm really doing is taking that 6 and making sure each thing in top gets divided by 6. So 4 over 6 can reduce to 2 over 3. Great. And then 2 radical 22 over 6 can simplify. If I just leave this radical 22 alone, I can simplify 2 over 6 to be 1 over 3. So I can do, now 2 over 6 is 1 over 3. I can put the 22 on top with the 1, or I can just put it floating here. I'm going to put it on top of the 1, and I'm actually just going to replace the 1 since you don't need a 1. There we go. So there's our answer to this question. Like I said, this will tell you how far you need to simplify it. Most of the time, I'll say simplify as far as you can. So this would be my answer. If they tell you to actually find the decimal values, all you're going to do is type on your calculator 2/3 plus radical 22 over 3. And then you're going to get your decimal answer, which will be about 2.23. And then I'm going to do it again, but instead of a plus, I'm going to do a minus. So 2/3 minus radical 22 over 3. And that works out to be a negative 0.9, about, approximately. All right, so just read the question carefully and make sure you're answering as far as they'd like you to go. So this one should have said simplify as far as possible, or simplified to be this form. They might tell you to also write the decimal equivalents. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.